So one thing you're focusing here that I'm taking some interest in is I'm going to now be seeing, is there a certain dynamic in other fields as well, where there's the creation of the thing, the food itself, getting the food and preparing the food, and then the service, the person facing industry of it. Are we going to see, I'm going to be interested to see how many other fields have that kind of dichotomy where somebody could be in the section that's actually facing the customer. As you said, they're more personable, so it makes sense. They're the ones dealing with the actual people. They're serving the food in that kind of sense. They're the service industry part of the food industry, which and then there's the other part, the farmers and the people in the kitchen and things like that, when you go that far, who are just making the food and producing the actual goods themselves. Like, which then the dichotomy or the relationship of those two working together, I think that would be an interesting thing to see. I'm sure some of the people will consider in the front facing, they would say we're more important, because if the people don't like coming to this restaurant, even if you make the best food, we're not going to eat it. The people in the back might think, hey, if the food's not good, I don't care. It doesn't matter how amazing the the ambiance is. People won't come to eat if they're getting sick every time they come. So there's that kind of interesting mix. Do you know any people that went to both sides? Like, you're one of the people that has had a lot of interaction with people on both sides, and I think that's more of the personality of the kind of person that you are. Just from the fact that we get along this much shows that I'm also the kind of person who doesn't really stick so much in one group. Like, I'll kind of cross different lines in different places where someone's like, why are you talking to those people? I'm like, it's a person to talk to. It's more information. I want to know that. How much is that? How much have you seen, if there's any examples of people who maybe started at the front, then went to the back, or started in the back and then went to the front? Like, have you had an experience with that?
In general, people tend to pick either or. But the thing is, like, I know some of the most successful chefs will work front of the house at some point because they want to learn it. So, like, for the sake of, I want to open my own restaurant, I want to see what good service is, so I'm going to work in that position to see what they go through. And then when I open my own place, I'm going to apply what I learned there. I know other people, like my friend, I think I mentioned briefly, he used to work at Alinea. He's a mixologist, bartender. He does some I think I don't know if he's a rep, but like he works pretty prominent in the bartending industry. He used to work in the kitchen too, and like me, he just didn't like it. And I guess he came from a restaurant family and he worked in the kitchen but didn't like it, so he went to front of the house. I'll probably get more into this later in the discussion, but for me, what it was it was a combination of deciding I didn't want to cook professionally anymore, but also I was trying to decide what else I wanted to do in the meantime. But the front of the house was a lucrative thing for me because it's okay, I can apply things I've learned already, and plus a lot of places they like having front of the house people who've worked in kitchens because you see both sides of it, so you understand what do kitchens go through, what do servers go through. But also because I have a culinary degree and people tell me I have good food knowledge. Again, I mean, that's subjective, but the point is it's more valuable to have someone who has both of those experience, whereas it's someone who's just like, hi, I've never worked in a restaurant, I want a job. I mean, that's not as valuable versus I went to culinary school, I worked in kitchens, I've done some front of the house. That's more appealing to people because then it's like, you know how kitchens function. And then we'll probably get into this as the conversation goes on too, but then you understand certain logistical things. So if something is taking a while, okay, how do you placate guests? If something is taking a while, how do you sort of like work your way around that? How do you make things clear in a way so the kitchen's not confused when you put in orders? I mean, I think there are a lot of things that go into this being on both sides. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a fact of life. I think that cuts across the board. It applies everywhere. And that's part of why I want to do this series. Just more knowledge about anything, I think, makes you more functional to do those great things. Even if you're not actually going to do it yourself, just having an appreciation for what somebody in the front, what somebody who's seating people might have. It helps you understand. If you have more of an understanding of the kind of effort that the chefs are making to actually get that food out there on time, I think it comes off in how you interact with the people who you're also dealing with. Like, you feel some kind of ownership or some kind of participation or some kind of value, that I'm not just passing on this product that's I don't care of, but it's something that's kind of together. It's something that I don't know if a sense of ownership is the appropriate term to say for this, but just, I think the more you know about things, the more you value them. Even things you might dislike, the more you know about those things, at least you understand their place in reality and existence, and then you can attribute the right amount of mental space and interest into that thing, and not be so brought down by something that's not that big of a deal, or not make a bigger deal out of things that are rather small and insignificant. I think that just makes for a better state of life, in my personal experience and from what I've observed from other people.
Well, I was going to elaborate a little bit on that within the profession of cooking itself. They talk about how a lot of cooks, it's good to either butcher animals or actually go to a farm and see
Yeah.
it done because then you feel a tie to what you're producing. So it's easy to like overcook a steak and throw it in the trash. But if you killed the cow that it came from or you had a role in it, you're going to feel some sort of hurt because you're like, wait a minute, this was a living thing. I killed it. I put effort into this and now it's gone. And it's like, you feel something. Whereas if you make a good steak, it comes out, somebody says, that's the best steak I've had. You feel a sense of gratification because you were along, you participated in that along all steps of the way. Versus again, it's like, if it's just some random thing you throw in the trash, it's like, whatever. I mean, you don't think much of it.
And that's something we've talked about before in the several
Yeah.
conversations about the food things. The recent one we just had about the burgers. You talked about the one Bell Hook and Candle, where they had
Yeah.
the house
Bell
made.
Book and Candle.
Oh, what was that?
Bell Book and Candle.
Bell Book and Candle, not Hook.
I think
Yes.
you were thinking of bell hooks for a sec.
Yeah. Fortunately, get out of my brain. So they have the a garden on top, and then they make
Mhm.
house-made pickles. And we also talked about my pedanticness or my semantics of people saying homemade. I'm like, you don't live here, but the whole
Yeah.
house-made thing, how inns used to be a thing, where it was like literally like they'd get the garden outside and they would bring you
Yeah.
food, or you'd be eating the same food that those people would be eating. So with that in mind, have you seen a difference between working at restaurants where it's the owner is actually somebody that's directly working with the actual restaurant and they're the ones who founded it versus the ones that are owned? I know in the food industry, a lot of places, especially in places like New York City, these bigger ones are like conglomerates. So we're not even talking about let alone the franchises where it's just McDonald's and different kind of places, but the ones where it's like a conglomerate of people who are investing to own a bunch of restaurants versus the ones where it might be like a chef, like you said, with DB Bistro, we've talked about that, where Bar Balud as well, where he's actually directly involved with it. He actually comes by, he's actually working in the kitchen. Have you seen a difference between that kind of environment, that kind of system?
I think, yeah, I think you really do for sure, because I think what it is because they're chefs by trade, they're invested in the well-being of the place. And of course, they obviously will put a lot of, usually what happens in these situations is they put things that they want on the menu, and then the chefs will tweak the menu. Their executive chefs who are appointed will tweak the menu accordingly and add a few things. But the rule is usually you have to keep things that the owner wants. So like at Bar Balud, there's the charcuterie, there's like a steak frites, there's the sausages, there's coq au vin, there's things like that. But then it's like all the specials and things the chef can pretty much do, like, has pretty much free reign, as far as ordering, as long as food cost is under a certain level and it fits the style of the restaurant, and obviously the feedback is good. The challenge, I think, when a lot of places cut corners, like for example, my old boss worked, I think I mentioned, at Tavern on the Green like way back when, and he said it used to be really good in its heyday because the owner was a chef, but then he died and it was either like his wife or daughter, someone took it over. They cut all these corners because they just saw it as, if I do this I'll save money, if I do this I'll save money. And then it's like the food just became basically mediocre, and it's like you're paying for overpriced food just in a nice location. And that's when it closed. But then someone bought it up, it reopened. I don't know how it is now, but that's how you kind of see that happening. Whereas when my boss worked there was a chef actually running it, so he was passionate about what was on the menu and he had more creative interest.
Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.